Okay, so today where we are is on Lamed Dalet Amud Beis, but we left off a bunch on Lamed Dalet Amud Aleph. So just again to start from Lamed Dalet Amud Aleph, we will start by the Tana Rabbanan, a few lines down from the top of the Gemara. Tana Rabbanan, Shloisha Ruban Kosha Mutin Yafa. There are three things which a lot of them, a lot of which is bad. Umiyutin Yafa, getting a little bit of it is good. Be'eluhein Se'er, V'melech, V'sarvanas. Those three things are Se'er, too much of yeast, is sourdough is not good for the tavshil. Melech, too much salt is going to burn the tavshil. V'sarvanas, too much refusal. Somebody who wants to be humble, but too much of it is also not good as well. If somebody made a mistake in the first three brachas of the Shemana Esrei, he should go back and start from the beginning. If he forgot something in the middle of the Shemana Esrei, so then he should go back to Atachainin. And if you got something in the last three brachas, then you should go back to that avodah. So if you make a mistake in the first of the three, so then you go back to the beginning of Shemana Esrei. If you make a mistake in the middle, it sounds like you go to Atachainin. And in the last three, you go back to Ritzei. Ravasi disagrees with Rav Huna. Ravasi Amar Emtsoyes Ein Lahen Seder. Ravasi says that the middle brachas haven't gotten a Seder. What does it mean they haven't gotten a Seder? It means machlokes between Rashi and Tosfos. According to Rashi, Ein Lahen Seder means that if somebody made a mistake and let's say they forgot Hashivenu, so then they have to go back to Ein Lahen Seder. Means that there's no Seder in the middle of the middle brachas. And therefore, if somebody forgot a bracha, says Rashi, and then later on he remembers it. He should say it even if it's not in its regular place. That is to say, you just simply say Hachivenu wherever you're up to, and you continue going in the Shemana Esrei. So let's say you forgot Hachivenu, and then you remembered it by Hashiva Sheftenu. So say Hashivenu then, and then continue going with Hashiva Sheftenu. Tosfos disagrees with this idea. Tosfos says that's not what Enthos and Lehen Seder means. According to Tosfos, based upon a Gemara, the Gemara tells us in Megillah Yud Zayin, Hakuras HaMegillah, somebody who's relating the Megillah, Limafreya, if he does it backwards, Lo Yotzim. The Tanya, we have a brisa that it tells us V'chein b'halal, V'chein b'kriyah shema, V'chein b'tfilah. The same thing is true as it relates to Halal, Kriyah Shema, and Tfilah, that all those are not going to be done ala seder. If you're going to say backwards, you're going to say things that are not in the correct order, so then you're not going to be it. Including that is Tfilah. You can't say Tfilah backwards, meaning if you're up to Hashkivenu, if you're up to Hashiva Sheftenu, you can't say Hashivenu. That's not ala seder. So therefore, according to the way Tosfos wants to learn, you have to go with a seder, but you don't have to go back to Atachainin. So what does it mean? Emsayas Ein Lahen Seder. It means if you forgot Hashivenu, and then you remembered it by Hashiva Sheftenu. So you go back to Hashivenu and you continue going from there. But it's not that you have to go back to Atachainin. So it says, you don't have to go back to the beginning like you would by the first three or the last three brachas. So Tosfos then continues, and the halacha is that we pass him like Ravasi, not like Rav Huna. Tosfos gives a few reasons. Number one, it's because of the fact that we are paskening like the Bahag, says Tosfos, Bahag pasuk Ravasi, the Amar Emtsoyes Ein Lahen Seder. Why? Because Rav Huna was a Talmud of Ravasi. As we see in many places, Amar Rav Huna, Amar Ravasi. As we'll see in a second, for Rav Huna, he had to be Dochik the Mishnah. What's interesting is Rabbeinu Chananel also brings these reasons, but it does not quote the third reason Rabbeinu Chananel. Rabbeinu Chananel also says that there's the Yerushalmi that goes like Rav Asi and not like Rav Huna. So again, in the Taisus of Amtzeres Ein Lehen Seder, what does that mean? According to Rashi, Amtzeres Ein Lehen Seder means that if you forgot Hashivenu, if you forgot a bracha anywhere in the Emtsayas, you remember it. Whenever you remember it, you continue on from there, and there's no problem. Whereas according to the way Taisus learns, you have to go back to wherever you forgot, and from there you can continue. So if you forgot Slach Lanu, you go back to Slach Lanu and you continue from there. You don't have to go back to Atachaynin. Whereas according to Rashi, just say Slach Lanu wherever you are, and then you continue going Shemona Esrei, no issues. This is the machlokes here between Rashi and Tosfos. The Tosfos ends up continuing, and Tosfos says as follows: the Tosfos says that when it comes to the additions that we make in the Shemona Esrei by the Aseres Meitshuva and the like, so says Tosfos, if somebody makes a mistake, over there you have to go back to the beginning. And you forgot over there, for example, you forgot to etc. So they have to go back to Ritzev. The time of Kevin Shekula Shavach Havik Bracha Akas. And the reason you have to go back to Avoid is because they're all considered these last two brachas like one bracha of Shva, Shavach, and therefore you have to go back to Ritzei. The Tainus Tzibur, what happens if you have a Tainus Tzibur where the Shliach Tzibur is Kaveh Bracha La'atzmai? He makes a separate bracha of Anenu between Goyal and Reifei. So if you forgot that, and if you remembered before the end of the davening, then we don't make him go back. Because then, according to the way we're learning, you would have to go back and repeat the whole Shemana Esrei. It would be a big tircha tzibura. And it would also make all the brachas that you said in the middle of Brachot Levatala. But according to the way Rashi learns, it would end up off better because of the fact that you would be able to just continue and say that bracha where you are, and then there wouldn't be any issues. I just wanted to point out that it is very interesting, the idea of this machlokes between Rav Asi and Rav Huna about brachas, the emtsoyes, ein lehen seder. So according to what I was saying, Rashi is learning, so if somebody forgot Slach Lanu, and later on, they remembered that they forgot Slach Lanu, so they should just say Slach Lanu, and then continue going. So if they remember Slach Lanu by Yerushalayim Nercha, so say Slach Lanu, and then move on and continue with Vishlayim Erchlas. According to Tais, you have to go back to Slach Lanu and then repeat over the rest of the brachas, which would make the brachas that you said initially brachas levatal. So Rashi doesn't have that problem with brachas levatal. Fine. But there's another issue here, and that is that we already learned that the Gemara told us in Lamed Gimel and Aleph that the Anshe Knesset HaGedolah were metaking the tefillas. So what does it mean that they were metaking the tefillas? They created all the brachas that we have in Shemona Esrei. So what do you mean emtsoyes ein lehen seder? So for that you have to go back further. Also, the Gemara told us that Shimon HaPakuli was his der Yudches brachas of Rabbi Gamliel ala seder b'Yavne, and over there the Rabbeinu Chananel explains what does it mean. The Anshe Knesset HaGedolah had a seder of all the brachas, the 18 brachas. The first, as we know, the last, as we know. The middle, however, they didn't have a seder. Shimon HaPakuli got up in front of Gamliel and Yavne, and he did the emtsoyes the way he thought was appropriate. And Gamliel and the other rabbis liked it, so they adapted Shimon HaPakuli's seder, which is our seder today. But before Shimon HaPakuli, the emtsoyes were done by people as they pleased. If they wanted to say Slach Lanu one day first, they could. The one that they wanted to say, the bracha of Yerushalayim first, they could. That was open to each and every one. And after that, after Gamliel heard of Shimon HaPakuli do it, so then they changed it. Everybody had to adopt it. So when we saying, Rav Asi saying, Emtsoyes ein lehen seder, and Rashi saying, V'imdilek bracha achas, if you forgot a bracha, v'achar kach niskar ba, and then you remember it, so Omer af shaloi b'mkayma, you could say it even now in its place, because brachas, the Emtsoyes ein lehen seder. What is the shita that Rashi's holding? Rashi's telling us that Emtsoyes ein lehen seder means that even after Shimon HaPakuli made a seder, it still has a din of not having a seder, such that wherever you are in Shemona Esrei, you say, you remember now you forgot Slach Lanu, and you're up to Yerushalayim, no problem, continue on with Slach Lanu. So it has a din. Rav Asi is saying, the way I'm understanding Rashi, is that Ein Lehen Seder is fundamental. Even now that we adopted a Seder, the Emtsayas still don't have a fundamental Seder. Okay, continues the Gemara. So that's the Tosfos of Emtsois and Len Seder. So the Gemara continues now. Must Rav Sheshes asked the Kasha on Rav Huna. He said, "Me'echem hu chayzer." The Gemara told us, so where do you have to go back? Mitchilas habracha shetozeh. You have to go back to the place where you had forgotten. If you go back to the place where you forgot, mitchilas habracha shetozeh, you go back to Slach Lanu, let's say. So then that would be a Keneged Rav Huna. Rav Huna said that the whole situation in the middle, if you forget, you have to go back to Atachaining. So clearly you don't have to. You go back just simply to the bracha that you had made a mistake in. Says the Gemara, you have to do Rav Huna. The Gemara says that's got to be a contradiction to Rav Huna. So Amalach Rav Huna, Emtsoyes Kulu Chada Bracha Ninu. So Kulu Chada Bracha Ninu. According to the way Rav Huna learns, the Emtsoyes are all one bracha. This is one of the reasons Menach Hanana Taisus brings down that we do not, in fact, go with Rav Huna, we go in fact with Rav Asi, not just because Rav Asi was his Rebbe, but also because we end up in a situation where we're basically forced to say that the brachas emtsayis are all one bracha, which is a deichige answer. Says Ibn Hanan on the Taisus quotes as well, and therefore we're not going to rely on it. Interestingly, even though Taisus is willing to say that the brachas emtsayis, to say kulas chada birchas ninu is a deichek, what did Taisus say at the end of the Taisus of emtsayis and Len Seder? Taisus said that the time of the Kavan Shekulu Shevach Havi Kebracha Achas, that Taisus himself learned that the last three brachas in Shemona Esrei are all considered one bracha. That is number one. Number two, also very interesting that Taisus used the lashon in the Taisus of the last three brachas. It's Kavan the Kula Shevach Havi Kebracha Achas. The last three brachas are Kula Shevach is one bracha. But if you look at Rabbeinu Hanan and my Gemara, it's brought down on Lam Dalam base. So if you look at Rabbeinu Hanan over here, Rabbeinu Hanan says no. What are the last three brachas? The lashon Rabbeinu Hanan, the Hashosh Achronis Avodah Vaydo V'Sim Shalom She'ela Nenu. The last three brachas are all considered she'ela. They're not considered shevach. We understand the last three brachas are haydah, but if you think about the last three brachas, if you go through the brachas, you'll see Ritzeh is asking, and Shim Shalom is asking. The only one that's shevach is maidim. That's the only one that's really asking. The other two are that's the only one that's really praising. The other two are really asking. Okay, we'll have to go see that a little bit more in a second. Okay, I think that's how you understand Rashi. And the Machlokes of Emtsois and Len Seder, Rashi has two benefits. One is the benefit of understanding that Shimon HaPekuli Seder is not fundamentally a Seder, and that therefore you don't get a bracha levatala when you don't have to go back to all the brachas and repeat them all, so you don't get a bracha levatala. That's the big benefit of how Rashi is learning. Okay, finish the Gemara. So we are now. And about halfway down Alam Dalam now. So a person not supposed to ask for things in the first three brachas. The last three brachas, it's only in the middle. Because the first three brachas are like an Eved who's Masada Shevach in front of his Rebbe, and the middle brachas are somebody who's asking for a prize. You're asking for a prize. Think of that etymology of the word. Prize and prize are very similar. Then you're allowed to ask for that. But the last brachas, somebody's already received the prize, and then he's going to be moving on. Now, before we go any further, remember that we have the Gemara. The Gemara told us in Lamed Aleph that Yochel Shal Adam Tzroch V'Achagak is Baal time before Shalidei, right? They Shlema the Shemer Levina Lela Tefila, right? Vina is do Tefila, Tefila is do Bakasha. So that's what we're passing the Ram tells them in Tefila that a person first has to what? Before he starts asking for things, he first has to give a praise for the Rebbeinu Shalom. That's why we say the Brachot Hashanah first, and there is no asking there. However, points out twice, the second to last twice, Al Yishlam Tzorach V'Levi Gim Shaz Lam Yigim Lachon, Perish Rabbeinu Chanan of Rabbeinu Hai. The Torah is supposed to give Rabbeinu Chanan of Rabbeinu Hai going. The Dafkal Yachid, you're not supposed to be asking for yourself personally in the first three brachos. So after October 7th, someone wanted to daven Matzah Asum and think about himself for the various Shvuyim. 100% no problem, because you're allowed to daven for public tefillas in the middle of the first tefillah. So it's not the private tefillas. That's what we're allowed to say, which is asking for a life. And the krevetz are important. Which will be in the last three. You're no problem to do it, even though you're asking. And here, Titus points out, even though previously I just said they given Shpul Shavak, in the previous Titus, here Titus seems to suggest that the last three brachas are Tzarchei Tziburhem, which means he's acknowledging the fact that they are really also asking, and they're not just merely Shavak. Fine, continues the Gemara. So the next Gemara is a Ma'isa Tanar Abban Ma'isa Tam Nachat Shiyar Lefnei Ateva B'Fnei Rebelezer V'Vayam Ma'irech Yosem Midai. Somebody got up to daven, right? I should say not got up. Shiyar Lefnei Ateva. Right, he got down. I already pointed out many times. Mimakim Kirasich Hashem. People went down. We'll see this again on Lamadal base. People will go down to daven. In Europe, many of the old shuls, you go down when you go to daven. So a person went down to go daven, and he was a big Ma'irech. He was a lot of kavan. Oh, this guy is mamash, a very lengthy davener. So Amalem Klum Marches and Moshe Rabbeinu. He's not any longer than Moshe Rabbeinu. He said, Moshe Rabbeinu for 40 days and 40 nights. Another story that Talmud went to go daven, and he was very, very quick. This guy is mamash very fast. He's certainly not any shorter in terms of his daven than Moshe Rabbeinu. You see how fast Moshe Rabbeinu davened for Miriam? Right, and remember, in this case of Moshe ben daven for Miriam, it would be protected. If he was davening for too long, people are like, oh, because he cares about his sister, so he davened super fast. Only really, 5 words, and that was sufficient. Amar Rav Yaakov, Amar Chizda, someone who's davening for their neighbor does not even have to mention the name. Hashem knows who the names are. He didn't even mention Miriam's name, just to point out that we had to come over here and Lamed Aleph. That right? Rabbi Kiva was very careful that because of Tirchat Tzibur, when he would daven on his own, he would create a shtach avodas. He would daven very long, or jumping all over the place. But when he davened in public, Rabbi Kiva was mekatzev ha'olam Tirchat Tzibur. He didn't want to make the people wait. So we're talking about a situation where somebody was married midai, meaning it was causing a tirchat tzibur, and people were worried. Obviously, in the case of Moshe Rabbeinu, no tirchat tzibur. Moshe Rabbeinu is davening as Sabarim Malel. Moshe Rabbeinu is davening on his own. It's not a question of tirchat tzibur, but in general, a person who's davening for the Amud needs to be aware of the time that the shul has for normal Shmoneh Esrei. Continues the Gemara. Tana Rabbanan. So now 3 lines from the bottom. When a person is going to bow in the beginning and the end of the Avis, right? By Baruch Ata and Magen Avram, and also by Ritzei, right? A person is going to bow down by Maidim, and also by B'chel Chaim. If someone wants to bow down more, he wants to bow down the beginning and the end of every bracha, we teach him he shouldn't be doing this. Says Taisus, bottom Taisus, what's the problem? The guy who wants to bow, he's a big bower. What's the problem? You know what the problem is? The problem is somebody's going to be machmer against what the Chacham say, and it's going to end up being a situation where people can do whatever they want. It's going to be, what? Like it says in the beginning and the end of Shoftim many times, the idea of a melech b'Yisrael ish kol hayasher be'ein of yasser. People are going to listen to the rabbis. They can do what they want. So people are going to start bowing. The problem is not fundamentally with bowing. The problem is fundamentally with not listening to the Chacham. And maybe it's a situation that points out a second point, which maybe be a bit of a bal guy, but I can bow. I'm ready. I'm at the level where I'm bowing. Fine. Continues the Gemara. Amar Shimon Pazi. Amar Rabbi Shua ben Lakish. I'm sorry. Amar Shua ben Levi. Rabbi Shimon Pazi says the name of Shua ben Levi. Mishum Mar Kapara. Hedjit. K'moshe Rabbeinu. If you turn the page to Lamed Daled Amud Beis. Rabbi Shimon Pazi saying the name of Rabbi Shimon Levi in the name of Bar Kapara, that with regards to a hedjit, this is correct. With regards to a hedjit, this is correct in the sense of that a person who is a hedjit is only permitted to bow during the times of the rabbis that's enunciated, which is 4 times Shemona Esrei, the first and the last, the first bracha, the first beginning and the end, and in the bracha of Haidah, the beginning and the end, and that is it. Says the Gemara, however, as we turn the page, the Kohen Gadol bows in the beginning and the end of each and every bracha. And a king bows in the beginning and the end of every bracha. The Kohen Gadol bows in the end of every bracha, and a king beginning and end of every bracha. Says Rashi, why is that? The greater person is, the more he has to machnia himself to the Rebbeinu Shalom. Where do we see this? Best example of where we see this? Parashas Tetzaveh. Look there. You'll see clearly that, and look at the Rishonim, look at the Ramban, look at the Orachaim, others, etc. Big discussion of whether or not Moshe Rabbeinu showered Aaron at the beginning, right, and his sons. Did he get them dressed? How much did he get them dressed? Did he put on their pants? Literally, each one of these things is discussed by the Rishonim. It's not appropriate. Moshe Rabbeinu should have to get them dressed. Says the Orachaim. Even an Eved Ivri, you would not be, or Eved Kanani, you would not be allowed to make them do this kind of menial, this degrading labor. How could Moshe Rabbeinu be asked? I always have the answer. This Gemara is the answer. The greatest person alive of all time, you might think that he is, in fact, as we saw already in the Gemara, right? The Gemara pointed out earlier that why did Moshe Rabbeinu, we said lech raid? Why should Moshe Rabbeinu go down? Because your gedula was only why, said the Gemara, only because of the fact klum nasat l'chol gedula. It's in the Gemara Lama base. Klum nasat l'chol gedula b'shul Yisrael v'achshav yisrael chatu atalamli. You're only great because of the Jewish people. You're only great because your Rebbeinu wants you to have a certain job. So therefore, even for Moshe Rabbeinu on his level, and he was the Anamite. And Moshe Rabbeinu had no problem doing it. He was happy to give Aaron a shower, put on his pants, no problem. Not only Aaron, his kids, his nephews, he had to do the same thing for. No problem. Why? Because Moshe Rabbeinu is the Anamite. The lesson wasn't for Moshe Rabbeinu. The lesson was for the Jewish people, not to forget that it's all from the Rebbeinu Shalom. As great as Moshe was, he had to be humbled in front of the Jewish people, even though for himself he obviously didn't need it. This is the Gemara Rabbi Yitzchak Bar Nachmani says, according to me, I understand the words of Rabbi Shimon Levi, Hedjit K'Moshe Amarnu, and when it says a Hedjit, it's like we have explained, meaning that by a Hedjit, we are going to be in a situation where we're going to bow only 4 times Shemona Esrei. And the Kohen Gadol is going to be bowing in the beginning of each bracha. But a king, once he bows in the beginning, he's not going to stop bowing. So it's a bit of a different story, right? What we had said beforehand is that the Kohen Gadol is going to be bowing b'soif kol bracha. So Rabbi Yitzchak Bar Nachmani is saying, I heard from Yeshua and Levi a bit different, right? Hedjit, like we've already said 4 times, but Kohen Gadol tchilas kol bracha. But the Kohen Gadol is going to be the beginning of each and every bracha, and whereas the Melech, he's not going to bow down at the beginning and the end of every bracha. Rather, he's going to bow down once, and he's not going to get up until he's finished Shemona Esrei. Shlomo finished davening by the bidding of the Beis Hamikdash, by the coming of the Beis Hamikdash, the inauguration. So come lifnei is Be'ach Hashem Mikra al Birka. The pasuk says they got up, meaning that the whole time he was davening, he was bowed, and he was the king, and he was bowed down the whole time. Okay, continues the Gemara. Now we'll discuss different kinds of bowing. So we want to continue to explain a few different kinds of bowing. There's 3 levels of bowing. Kida is on your face like this. You go like this down. That's Kida. When Bathsheba came to try to get her son Shlomo to be the king instead of Adonio, she bowed her face down. Kriya al Berkayim. Kriya is not just bowing down on your face. It's going down on your knees. Going down on your knees. From bowing down on the knees. What is Ishtach Havoya? That is actually prostrating yourself on the whole body is fully flat, prone on the ground, face down. Ishtach Havoya is absolutely usher. The only place where Ishtach Havoya is permitted is in the Temple Mount. It's not permitted anywhere else. The Yaakov Avinu, when he was making a joke of Yosef's dreams, but of course, where he did it publicly so that the brothers shouldn't think that Yaakov took it seriously, and maybe that they should have more mercy on Yosef. He said to them, he said to Yosef, we're going to come and be prostrating ourselves to you on the ground. What kind of a joke is that? Your mother's dead, and you think I'm going to do this? The Gemara says, so again, 3 different types. Kriya is the common one that you see, right? If you ever want to go see a king knighting somebody, that's Kriya. They bow down on their knees, right? Their faces are up, but they're bowing down on their knees. Kida is the faces down, and Ishtach Havoya is fully prone. Okay, continues the Gemara. So Amar Rav Chia Brei Rav Huna Chazinu LaAbaya Barava de Masli Asluye. So Rav Chia, son of Rav Huna, said, I saw Abai and Rava that they were leaning sort of on the side. Rashi says, and Rabbi Chananel says, that what we're talking about here is tachnon, right? When somebody's bowing down for tachnon, that there be no al paneim. So ein poshtin yidem v'ragleim elam matan atzadem. When you by noifel al paneim, they didn't like mamish sort of lie flat on the ground. But rather, what they did was that when noifel al paneim, the way we do it, like sort of like leaning on the side. You remember we had the masli asli, we had that already in the Gemara earlier. We talked about the it's a Gemara you give on the base. The Gemara told us that a prakton leikari kriyash was somebody who's lying on a bed, and we said, oh, but if somebody's matzli, if somebody would be leaning on the side, that would be fine. So we had a sort of an idea of that. So here we're talking about not about kriyash on a bed. We're talking here about by Nefilas Apayim. The Rav Nissim Goyen seems to suggest that maybe the reason was because over there was an issue of a stone floor, ritzvah shel avanim. Maybe that was the issue. Not 100% clear. Rashi doesn't mention that. In any event, this is our custom today. And when we do tachanun, we are not bowing down in any way. We're just sort of being matzli asli. We're lying down sort of on the side, as Rashi says, kishnayif n'alpanim, and pushing them. We sort of like lie on our side. We put our hand on our head in our hand. Continues the Gemara. We have one Bryce that tells us that somebody who bows down during Moedim is praiseworthy. Now we have another Bryce that says that somebody who bows down during Moedim it's a meguna, it's a negative thing. So what's it sounds like a stira? Like kasher b'tchila b'soif. One opinion is that maybe that's in the beginning, one's at the end. In the beginning, the way we do it, that's okay. But in the end, that would be meguna. But obviously, our minig is not that way. Continues the Gemara. Rav akar b'aydah b'tchila b'soif. Rav would bow down b'aydah both at the beginning and the end, the way we do. Amalei Rabbanan, I'm like Ovid Ma'ahak. They asked him, Rav, why do you do it this way? So Amar Lu Chazinu Rav Nachman Dekar. He said, I saw Rav Nachman that he bows like this. So v'chadinu Rav Sheshes the Kavod, and we saw Rav Sheshes. He also bow like this, meaning at the beginning and the end. By Moedim and B'chalachayim, they would bow. So says the Gemara. But I have another brayse about Tanya. I carry by Doris and Miguna, but there's another brayse that says that somebody who bows by Idah, it's a not a good thing. Meaning at any point in Idah. So how do we allow to be bowing? Says the Gemara, Ahiba Idah shebahalal. That's from Idah in halal that you're not supposed to be bowing down by the Idah in halal. What is that? What is that? What is that? I have no idea. Hopefully my wife will figure it out because I have no idea. Okay, moving on. CO, carbon dioxide, carbon monoxide. I see, definitely it's hold on, my wife's calling me. Hold on. All right. Continues the Gemara. So where were we up to was that so we had a steer in the price. The price says in another place that it's mashma that you're not supposed to be sorry for the background noise for those who listen. So so we have another price that says you're not supposed to be bowing. So how could we say that we do bows? We said, oh, that price is talking about by the Haidah and Hala. Fine. So then they more ask another kasha, Tanya, but we have another price that says like a Rebbe Haidah, Ube Haidah Shel Halal. Another price says that somebody who bows during Haidah and Haidah of Halal have raised a Maguna. So you see again that it's a Maguna thing. It's already a very negative thing. So if it's a very negative thing, that it's a very Magunadik thing, so then you're again back to the problem of how is he able to bow at all? So the Gemara answers, Kitanya hi b'haidah de berachas hamazon. So we end up saying that the two places where it's meguna or not appropriate to bow is by haidah of halo and by haidah of berachas hamazon. We say no delacha. There you're not allowed to bow, but bowing in relation to Shemona Esrei is not a problem. Yes, there were those who had a custom to bow at the beginning, but we go with Rava, who was bowing at the beginning and the end, because they saw that by Rav Nachman, they saw that by Rav Sheshes. All right, so that finishes up the Mishnah. Now up to that finishes the Gemara. Now up to the Mishnah on Lamed Daled and Beis. Says the Mishnah, Maspal v'tor simin ra loy. Somebody who's middle of davening and he makes a mistake. That's a bad simin. Shliach tzibur who simin ra l'sholchem. And if he is a shliach tzibur, then it's a simin ra for the people that sent him. Why mnesha shluchay shel adam k'maisai? Because the person who has sent someone to daven is almost like their agent is the one who's davening. So if it's a situation where the chazan is making a mistake, it's like the tzibur nabach is not going to have a great situation. Amar Lav Rav Chanina ben Daisa. Rav Chanina ben Daisa we knew was a big miracle worker where we had already the story with him and the hole where the akriv was where he was able to have the scorpion or whatever it was that thing died because of Chinim Medesh was just a holy person. More times Chavdal, Chavhei, about what a tzaddik he was. The Gemara earlier in Brachot that the whole world survives of Chinim Mendesa. Chinim Mendesa is sufficient for him just to have a little bit of a boxer. So the Mishnah tells us when Rabbi Chinim Mendesa would daven for Chaylim, Shem Espal al Chaylim v'Amru Zechav Zemeis. He was able to know who's going to live and who's going to die. Amrullah Minayin Atziyadeh. They said, "How do you know this?" And he would answer them, if I am davening well, then I know it's going to be makubal. And if I'm not davening well, if I'm not having a tefillah b'shigur b'fi, then I know that it is not going to work out well. Says Morahei, what is this going on? This mission that tells us I'm a spal of someone who makes a mistake when he davens a bad simon. Does that go anywhere in davening? Anywhere the shliach makes a mistake, that's automatically going to be a bad sign? Ahei says the Gemara, Amrav Chi Amrav Safra Mishum Chad de Beirav Be'avis. Rav Chia says the name of Rav Safra, the name of one of the rabbis, that we're just talking about as the first bracha. If somebody makes a mistake in Avis, that's when it's going to be a bad sign. Ika de Masin La Brisa. There are those who would like to say this on the Brisa. Hamaspal Tzar Sheichavin Esliba Bekulan. Somebody there are those that want to explain this as follows on a Bryce. Somebody who's davening has to have kavanah in everything. And if he's not able to have kavanah in everything, so then he should have just kavanah at least in one. So if somebody's only able to have kavanah in one thing, so where should it be? But others. Tais is bothered by a question because we had a Gemara earlier on Laman Beis where the Gemara told us that a person has to decide if before davening he's able to have kavanah or not, and if he's not able to have kavanah, he shouldn't daven at all. So Tais says that must be only with regards to the first bracha. We're not meaning that a person has to have kavanah the whole Shemona Esrei. I always like to point out to Yerushalmi. The Yerushalmi in the beginning of brachas tells us that various different Amiram didn't have kavana. Rav Chia Hagadol said about himself, "Min yomi lo kivanti alachad zman." He never had kavana except one time. Shmuel said about himself that he was thinking about counting chickens. Rav Masna would give thanks to his. Rav Tanya would give thanks to his legs that they would bow down at the right times. And even though the Pnei Moshe says that all this is because they were too busy thinking about learning, the Pashup Pshat of the Gemara was that they had, Kavanah is hard. Kavanah is not a simple thing. Kavanah is not a simple thing. Continues the Gemara. Says the Gemara, Amar Olav Rabbi Chanina ben Dosa. So they said about Rabbi Chanina ben Dosa that he was essentially such a miracle worker that he was at a level where if he had ever a mistake, it would be a situation where Rabbi Chanina ben Dosa would know that his davening wasn't answered. For the Gemara, Minani Mili, how do we know this? Amar Rabbi Shimon Levi Dal Makra, Bari Nivs Vasem, Shalom Shalom L'Rachman for that curve. The pasuk tells us that Hashem created the lips, the mouth, and his peace, right, for those who are close and those who are far. What does this have to do with anything? What does this have to do with anything by saying this about Chinim and Taisa? Says the Gemara, Amr Abchia bar Abba Amr Rabbi Yechon. I'm sorry. Burn if so some Shom Shon L'Rochav L'Akarv. Amr Hashem Rufas. Hashem is going to say, I heal them by those, but in the beginning of the pasuk it says Bari Nib Sifasoyim. He created the lips, right? The lips. If the says Rashi Kishahaniv Bari Ba'adam, when the lips are working, when the person is able to speak, so then Az Muftach Al Hashem, then he's going to be confident about the peace, about the security, about the situation being okay. Right? Hashem created the lips. Bari Nib Sifasoyim. Shalom, shalom. It'll be peaceful. Hashem says, I will heal them. And so therefore, I will heal them means that if it's nifsa basayim, shalom, shalom, if there's the peace with the lips, in other words, if the lips are working well, if you're able to daven well, so then you know Hashem says, I'm going to heal them. And if not, not. Now we want to dash on this pasuk some more. But we're not going to get to see that until the last drash here. Amar Avchia bar Abba, Amar Rabbi Yechanan. All the Nevi'im were not prophesying except for somebody who's going to marry his daughter off to a Talmud Chacham, and to somebody who's going to do business for a Talmud Chacham. The whole Gemara is that a person is supposed to be able to help support a Talmud Chacham with business. And also for somebody to give a benefit to the Talmud Chacham from his possessions. But the Talmidei Chacham themselves, no one's seen their incredible reward that they get. What's going to be done for those who wait for them. Fine. This is a Gemara also from the end of. It appears also in Sanhedrin. The idea of somebody marrying off the door Tam Chacham, Psachim, also more than Ksubis. All these ideas about how important it is to be connected to a Talmud Chacham in some way, whether by marrying oneself, whether by Talmud Chacham's daughter, or by marrying your son off to a Talmud Chacham's daughter, but some way to be connected, to help them in business, etc. All the Nevi'im did not give a nevuah except for Yemaisa Mashiach. But Olam Haba, Ayin LaRasa L'Kim Zul Secha. Right, the very big difference, fundamental difference between Olam Haba and Yemaisa Mashiach. They're not the same. So by Olam Haba, a person is in a situation where we don't know anything about it. We have no idea what Olam Haba is. We're only up to nowadays. We're only talking about Yemaisa Mashiach. Yemaisa Mashiach and Olam Haba are not the same. And what we're saying over here is a fundamental difference between the two. Let's just keep the door open for a moment because we're still not sure what's going on here. Okay, continues the Gemara. We're not 100% sure if there's a difference between Elam Hazeh and Yemaisa Mashiach. According to Shmuel, there is no difference. The Rambam brings this down the end of Mishnah Torah. The Rambam brings down Shmuel as his version of the halacha. There's really not going to be a difference in the future, but we're not 100% clear. Because there won't be a dearth of poor in the land, which means that even in the future there will be still regular people. There'll be poor people, rich people, etc. All right, well, we'll have to stop over here.